Identities are not formed overnight. People go through changes all the time, and musicians are obviously real individuals with ever-changing characteristics. But fans somehow expect that the music they create to be almost the same throughout their entire careers. Otherwise, they start to get pissed off. But honestly, in our heart of hearts, do we really want artists to keep churning out variations of the same song for their entire careers? No, music is a creative process and requires ceaseless innovation to survive. Still, that doesn't mean we can't be surprised at just how drastically a musician has altered their sonic style across their career. So just as your wild and crazy college roommate eventually stops doing beer bongs and starts preparing his taxes on schedule every year, a band in their formative years are going to sound a lot different than they will once they've matured. I'm Will for WhatCulture, welcome to WhatCulture Music. Check out the Spotify link down in the description below so you can hear all the stuff we're talking about through the video, and here are 8 musicians who sound nothing like they did when they started. Number 8. Goo Goo Dolls were thrash rockers. Did you know that the Goo Goo Dolls were once capable of rocking out? There was a point when Long Way Down wasn't considered the grittiest thing they'd ever recorded. Their first album, the aptly named Goo Goo Dolls, was pure, messy punk rock, complete with shouted lyrics and sloppy guitar shredding. It was recorded on a shoestring budget with a different lead singer and, according to the band, a complete lack of sobriety. The result is a dead Kennedys-esque album that would thoroughly confuse anyone who accidentally put a bunch of random Goo Goo Doll songs into the jukebox. Their follow-up, 1989's Jed, had a little more sheen to it, but it is still a far cry from the adult contemporary waiting room music the Goo Goo Dolls would go on to produce later in their career. This is the album that has a song in it called Sex Maggot, so yeah, it's a thing. Even their major label debut in 1990, Hold Me Up, was still a true garage rock album. Really, it wasn't until a few years later when they released their breakthrough single Name that they swiftly transitioned into being everyone's mum's favourite rock band. Number 7. Fun was a cutesy little indie band. Known for their bombastic hits We Are Young and Some Nights, the guys from Fun seemed to come out of nowhere. But prior to burning up the airwaves, everyone in the band had already been in the music industry for years. Lead singer Nate founded the indie rock act The Format back in 2002 and began releasing jangly desert pop classics almost immediately. They're a bit dorky, but it's a good example of radio-friendly songwriting if you want to follow up on it. When he formed Fun, their first album Aim and Ignite was essentially more of the same, a collection of baroque pop with delicate melodies and a keen sense of storytelling. It wasn't until their sophomore album Some Nights that the band decided to bring in a hip-hop producer that had previously worked with the likes of Kanye West and Jay-Z. They're not unrecognizable, but it was a big shift in their creative direction. Number 6. Pink was a generic R&B singer. People tend to think of Pink as a ballsy rock star who has always fought against her prototypical pop diva colleagues. Even when she surrounded herself with pop stars like Christina Aguilera and Maya for a tepid cover of Lady Marmalade, Pink still managed to stand out with that extra edginess. Yeah, it's really easy to forget that she started her career as the type of R&B songstress that she now rages against. Remember her debut single There You Go? That could have been Brandy or Monica or Destiny's Child. There's not much of her personality there, and if you dig back even further you find that, as a teen, Pink was in a female R&B group called Choice, which produced only one song, Key to My Heart, the most vanilla love song ever associated with a Shaquille O'Neal film. That girl now sings about leaving dudes with blue balls and dirty little freaks who gets kicked out of bars. Good for her. Number 5. Sugar Ray was a new metal punk band. In the mid to late 90s, Mark McGrath was the lead singer of a thrash, funk, rap, metal band that was more interested in playing their instruments fast and harsh than they were in securing a spot on the live-action Scooby-Doo movie soundtrack. It wasn't until Fly, from their second album Flawed, became a surprising hit in 1997 that they started to overhaul their sound to appeal to a more mainstream audience. And by overhaul, I mean earn a crap ton of money. Hey, it obviously made them more popular than the sound of their follow-up single to Fly, the funky, Chili Peppers-inspired RPM, was ever going to do. Number 4. HOOBASTANK was super into ska. In the early noughties, HOOBASTANK was one of the last bands to get swallowed up and swept away by the new metal tide. They got some love early on for a major label debut that took up the mantle that bands like Incubus had recently abandoned, with standout singles Crawling in the Dark and Running Away securing frequent rotation on MTV. Then they hit it big with a power ballad, The Reason, which kept them relevant for a couple of years before ultimately becoming a tiny footnote in music history. But long before they sold their souls to the radio devil, HOOBASTANK had begun making a name for themselves in Southern California as a funky little ska punk band. Their true debut album, the nonsensically titled They Sure Don't Make Basketball Shorts Like They Used To, featured an abundance of horns, down-tuned guitars, and the types of melodies that Mighty Mighty Boss Tones would probably consider rough drafts. A song like Can I Buy You a Drink has its feet firmly planted in a different era than anything else the band would create, which is a shame because that song is pretty cool. There were hints of their future sound sprinkled throughout this album, but the funky guitars and calypso beats were completely erased by the time The Reason made them pop superstars. Number 3, Katy Perry was a Christian rock artist. Katy Perry, the artist most known for wearing bras that shoot various fluids out of them and singing about threesomes, actually began her career as a contemporary Christian singer. Yes, that's Katy Perry, the one whose first commercially successful song was about making out with other girls for fun. The one who hasn't met a sexual innuendo she hasn't instantly wanted to bone. I'm not criticizing, sex sells and she's a pop artist, what are you gonna do? Anyway, back in the day though, still billed under her real name Katie Hudson, she incorporated all the trappings of the Christian rock scene. Interestingly enough, a review from AllMusic posited that a few of the songs had some very sexual overtones, and identified those as the most interesting things about the album. It took Katy 7 years to change her name and begin injecting those overtones super aggressively into her follow-up album, which her parents apparently hated. But damn, was it a hit. Number 2, the Bee Gees were prog rockers. Before they were getting their incredible falsettos all up into the disco era, the Bee Gees were actually a pretty solid prog rock band in the late 1960s. Barry and Robin Gibb were precursors to Rush in the prog rock canon. 1969's Odyssea, one of the most forgotten and underrated albums of the decade, places the Gibb brothers somewhere between the genres of the Allman Brothers and the Moody Blues. It's a little bit of the folk roots rock that the band helped perfect a few years earlier, but it also contains some weird atmospheric rock that would make Jefferson Airplane proud. This album also drew comparisons to another bunch of up-and-comers, the Beatles, thanks to a song called Melody Fair, which featured uncannily similar vocal harmonies and a little bit of Strawberry Fields Forever in the melody. But all in all, critics received Odyssea as an epic double album of sweet symphonic rock. Number 1, Danny Elfman was the lead singer of Oingo Boingo. You probably know Danny Elfman as the composer that jerks off all over the Lydian dominant scale. He's one of the few titans of the film music industry and an incredible musician. He's crafted nearly every iconic soundtrack you can think of that's not made by John Williams or Hans Zimmer, including Beetlejuice, The Nightmare Before Christmas, 1989's Batman, and The Simpsons. But before he was the guy behind the scenes scoring all the most influential movies of the last 3 decades, he was the lead singer of another band trying to piggyback on the new wave bandwagon. Originally known as the Mystic Knights of Oingo Boingo, Elfman and his bandmates started out as one half comedy troupe, one half theatre troupe, often wearing clown makeup and performing covers of Cab Calloway songs. Eventually they morphed into more of a ska-influenced new wave band, putting out some notable albums and writing songs for some goofy 80s teenage romps like Weird Science and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Apparently, Elfman caught the soundtrack bug and preferred the idea of writing songs for someone else rather than himself, and the rest is history. And there you have it folks, 8 musicians who sound nothing like they did when they started. Now obviously this is a new channel, so if you like music and music related stuff, please drop a comment with what you might like to see and leave a like, because it really makes a massive difference. Also share and subscribe and all that other YouTubey stuff. Anyway, I'm Will for WhatCulture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.
Does anyone know any songs then?
Not
No.
really.
Clearly knows Wonderwall.
Not all of it.
How about we do a video channel instead?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, cool. Yeah.
List, everyone?
List.
Fine.
Woo!